Okay, so hey, what's up guys? How's everyone doing? Hope you guys are doing fine. In this video, I'm gonna be doing a project that's based on CSS and HTML. It's basically a side navigation bar. So we have like a web page here that I made specifically for this project. And here I have a menu icon that I can click and it will open a side navigation bar that will do two things. The first thing is that it will push the content to the right. And the second thing is that when you open the menu, black transparent overlay that's displayed over the content. And then if you close it, then the main page becomes clear again and you can see it just the way it was before. Since I decided to make the project about the 7 wonders of the world, I downloaded pictures of every wonder of the world. Besides that, I also need a menu icon that I'm gonna use to display my menu. And then I also need like a cross mark that I'm gonna use to close the menu. So other than that, we just need to create our index file and we can get started. So at the beginning, I'm obviously gonna be needing all the head, body, and metadata. VS Code gives me a way of doing that real quick, and that is by pressing !enter, and it will automatically print the metadata that I need on the screen. So we can start working on our project here. Okay, so first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by making like the small nav bar that I have at the top that contains a menu icon. So I'll do like a div nav bar, and I'll immediately start previewing my project with live server so that we can see how every line of code impacts the project. At the moment, it's still empty. I'm gonna start making a style section at the top of the document. Of course, it's better if you give the styles their own file, but I want them to be on the same page for the sake of this tutorial. I'll start by targeting the nav bar here in the style section and giving it a background color of black. I'm going to be placing inside the nav bar the menu image that I'm going to be able to click so that I can open my nav bar. So I'll be using an image element. Inside the image element, I'll be using a menu.png. That is the image I downloaded previously. That's basically this image right here. So at the moment, the image is too big, so I'm gonna quickly resize the image. So I'll target the nav bar and specifically the image element inside the nav bar. So I'll do like a width of 25 pixels. As we can see, we have a little bit of margin around the nav bar. If we inspect this, we can see that it's gonna be caused by the body element. So I'll target the body and remove the margin that's around the body. So I'll go for body margin 0, and that will make it so that my top nav bar sticks to the edge of the browser. Okay, now we want to give the image a little bit of padding left of like, I don't know, 20, maybe 20 pixels. I can use the shorthand property of padding, which is going to be faster. I don't know, 10 pixel. Let's see how this looks. Okay, that's fine. Next thing I want to get done is the side nav bar. Let's start working on that. So we go to the body section here and we create a new div. This one, I'm going to give it a class of Sidenav. So I'm going to be using some links inside the nav bar, and I'll be starting by doing like anchor tags with an attribute of href equals, I'll just put the number sign. It's like a placeholder kind of thing when you still don't know what the link is going to be. And I'm going to be needing 6 of these. By the way, this is Emmet syntax. In case you don't know what this is, this basically means make 6 anchor tags with an href of number. And you're gonna see how this works when I press enter. Basically, VS Code will go and type all the anchor tags for me. It's just a quick way of getting some HTML elements typed real quick. So I wanna align them because VS Code didn't align them automatically for me. Okay, so let's start filling the anchor tags with some text. Like for example, usually you have home, then I don't know, products, then I don't know, contacts, staff, locations, and about. Okay, so this is how it looks. I want the side nav to be vertical, as we have seen in the preview of what the project is going to look like at the end. So we start targeting the side nav and give it a display of flex, and then change the orientation of the flex box by doing a flex direction column. This will make it so that now they're aligned vertically. We also want to remove the decoration on the anchor tags. So we do like side nav and target the anchor tags inside the side nav more specifically, and then do a text decoration none. This will remove the underline. And then we also do like a color of, for now I'll go ahead and do like a background color first, because I want the background to be black. So I'll do black. Oops, I shouldn't have put the background color here. The background color, it's the background of the side nav, not of this every single anchor tag. So this is how it looks like. And then I'm also going to change the color of the individual anchor tags to white. Okay, now we're going to give the side nav a width of, I don't know, 250 pixels. I'm also going to be adding the X that I can click in order to close the nav bar. So I'll go ahead and put it at the top here. Like before the anchor tag of home, I'm going to be introducing a new image element with a source of, and I'll go point to the cross mark that I downloaded before starting the tutorial. So now we have the X here. I just want to resize it because it's obviously too big. So I'm going to target the side nav, and more specifically, the image element that is inside the side nav. So we'll do a width of, again, 25 pixel. Yeah, that works. So I also want to push it all the way to the right, and I want it to stick to the top. So usually you do these kind of things by giving the image itself a display of, you give it a position of absolute. And in order for the position absolute to work, we need the side nav itself to have a position of relative. So this will allow me to position the X inside the side nav by giving it coordinates, basically. So we will see how this works right now. Okay, so I have like side nav is relative position. The image inside it is absolute. Now if I do this right 10 pixels, the X will move to the very right of the closest container that has a position that is relative. So in this case, it's the side nav, and it's going like 10 pixels to the right. I also want it to be 10 pixels from the top. So I also do like a top 10 pixel, and you will see how at the moment it's placed like 10 pixels over here, and there's a spacing of 10 pixels over here as well. Now I want to style my side nav. More specifically, I want to style the links inside my side nav. So I'll start by giving them a font size of 1.2 rem, for example. I want them to also have some padding, and I want to change the color to something that goes well with the close mark. So I'm gonna go for like a color dark violet maybe. Okay, that seems to work fine. I also decided that I want to change the color of the side nav so that we can see the difference between the side nav and the top nav. So I'll give it more of a grayish color instead of both of them being black. I'll give the side nav more of a grayish color so that we can see the difference. Okay, other than that, I also want the side nav, when it's open, to actually cover the top nav. I don't want it to be under the top nav. I want it to cover the top nav. So I'll do this by giving the side nav itself a display of absolute and making it stick to the top of the screen right here. So I'll go to the side nav, and okay, so as we can see, we already put the position of the side nav to be relative. But this can be changed to absolute, and it will not impact the way the image of the X is placed inside the side nav, because as long as the position is set to anything that is not static, static being the default value, it will still have the same effect. So we can change the side nav to absolute, And this won't impact how the X looks inside of the container or inside of the side nav. I can also do now like a top 0 and left 0. This means that the side nav will go and stick to the edge of the browser here. I want the side nav to take the whole height of the page, not just part of it. So I'll go and give it a height of 100 view height. 100 view height means take the whole view height basically. So this is how it looks after giving it a height of 100 view height. Okay, so now we have the side nav right here. I'll immediately go ahead and make a function that we can use to close the side nav. So at the bottom of my body here, just before closing the body tag, I'll do like a script. And obviously we can make a script in its own file or use JavaScript in its own .js file. But for the sake of the tutorial, I like to keeping everything in one page. So I'll define a function here that's called close side nav. So what is this function gonna do exactly? At the moment, the side nav has a width of 250 pixels. I want this function to reduce the side nav's width from 250 to 0, and this way it will basically disappear. So I'll start by getting a reference to the side nav in the global context of the script. Side nav equals document dot query selector, and then we type the name of the selector of the side nav. So it's gonna be side nav. Okay, so this constant, as soon as the script runs, will contain a reference to this side nav over here. Now inside my close side nav function, I want to use the reference that I just declared and go to the attribute that is called style, use a function called set property, and then do width and then 0 pixels. So in case this wasn't clear, this is gonna take the reference to the side nav, go to the styles of the side nav, target the width in the properties of the side nav, and reduce the size of the side nav to 0 pixels. What we want to do is make the X over here trigger this function whenever we click on the X. I'll go to the cross mark image here and give it an on-click listener that triggers the close side nav function. Okay, and let's test it. So when I click, the side nav disappears. As you can see, the side nav disappeared, but there's something that looks a little bit odd, is that the links that were inside the side nav did not disappear. They're still visible over here. So what is happening here exactly? These attributes, or I mean anchor tags, are overflowing. So we fix this by giving the side nav a property of hide overflow, which means whatever overflows from the side nav should be hidden. It shouldn't be shown. So if I go to my side nav styles and add a property of overflow hidden, since I saved it refreshed and it automatically opened the side nav again, but if I close it now, we will see how the side nav closes without being able to see the anchor tags that were pretty much hanging just outside here. So again, overflow hidden will hide the anchor tags that were overflowing. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. Now I want this menu icon right here to open the side nav. So we have a way of closing the side nav. Now I want to open the side nav without having to refresh the page every time. So I'll go ahead and define a function here that's called function open side nav. And what am I gonna need inside this function? I'm also gonna need a reference to the side nav, just like I needed the same reference in close side nav. And this is why I defined it in the global scope, because I knew that I was gonna like define another function where I'm also using the same reference. So if I define it in the global scope, then you can use it in whatever function is defined in the script. So I'll go over here and do like, I'll take the same line of code. It's gonna be the same exact thing, only that I want to set the width to 250 again. Let's see what happens if I close and then I try to open. Nothing happens because I still didn't assign the open Sidenav function to the menu icon. So I'll go and do that real fast. On the menu icon, I'm gonna add an onClick listener, and the onClick listener is gonna do like an open Sidenav. Okay, so every time I refresh, it's gonna open the Sidenav. I'm gonna fix that as soon as we have a way of opening it programmatically. Anyway, let's test our new function. So we close the Sidenav, it closes, that already worked before. Now this should open the Sidenav. Okay, so now we are able to open and close the Sidenav, and as we can see, the Sidenav is getting displayed on top of the nav bar, of the top nav bar, just like we want it to. Okay, so next thing I want to do is add some content to the page and make sure that when the Sidenav is opened, I want the content to the page to be pushed to the right. Anyway, let's start just defining here content section, for example. This is a div that's going to have a class of content section. And inside the content section, I'm going to do like an H1 that says the new seven wonders of the world. Okay, now I can give the Sidenav a default width of 0, since every time I'm going to be refreshing, it's going to open on its own. So instead of having it open and having to close it every time, I'm just going to give it a default width of 0 pixels. Right here, 0 pixels. Okay, so let's see now, if I refresh, it's not opening anymore. I'll position the header in the middle of the screen. So I'll target the new division that contains the header, which is the content section, and give it a display of flex and justify content center. So this will center the H1. And then I'm gonna start adding the pictures of the 7 wonders of the world. So I'll do that, and I'll be fast forwarding a bit. Okay, so now I'm done typing all the links to the images inside my image elements. I'm gonna save and see what happens. Okay, so what happened is that the images are being shown, but they're all displayed one next to the other. What I want to do now is have them show in a column instead of having them show one next to each other in a row. So I'll do that by targeting the content section and giving it a display of flex. And instead of having the default default orientation, which is row, I'm gonna give it an orientation of column. So flex direction, column. Of course, this made my justify content not work anymore. Like, it's no longer centering the H1, because when you change the flex direction, justify content gets switched with align items. So now if I want this to be centered inside a column, I have to align items instead of justify content in the center. Okay, so as you can see now, we have like the new 7 wonders of the world is again centered. Images are displayed in a column. Now I want to give every image a max width of 600 pixels. We don't want to have like something that's really narrow and then have something that's really wide afterwards. So let's go to the content section and images more specifically, and do a max width of 600 pixels. Okay, looks much better now. So I'll also add some margin to the bottom of every picture. For example, 1 rem to the bottom of every picture. Not bad. We can try to open our menu and see what happens. So the menu at the moment opens over the content page. What I wanted to do is have the menu push the content to the side. And an easy way of doing this is giving a margin left to the content page of the same width of my nav bar, and display that margin only when I open the nav bar. So I'm quickly going to show you what I mean here. I'll go to the content section and give it a margin left of 250 pixels. And when I open my nav bar over here, I notice that the Sidenav will still override the content, even though they're both supposed to have like a size or a width of 250 pixels, and it's supposed to also have a margin of 250 pixels. So real fast here, I just went and inspected the images, And I realized that images are actually overflowing the content section. So I want to make it so that the images will never exceed the size of the content section. So a way of doing this is, instead of giving it a max width of 600 pixels, is giving it a max width of 100%, which means never exceed the size of your container pretty much. This way, when I open the Sidenav, it will not go and cover the content. Another thing I can do is give the images a width of 600 pixels. So by default, if there is space to expand, it will take a width of 600 pixels. But it will also make sure to never exceed the container. So to speak, if the container is more than 600 pixels, it will go all the way to 600 pixels. But if the container happens to be less than 600 pixels, meaning you resize the screen so that the container is less than 600 pixels, then the images will only take 100% of the container. I'll expand this browser just to show you what would have happened if I didn't put the width to 600 pixels. If I didn't put the width to 600 pixels, then some pictures, when the browser is in its full size, would have taken like a big portion of the screen. But if I put the width to 600 pixels, then we have like pictures never exceeding 600 pixels and also never overflowing their content thanks to the max width property of 100%. Okay, so as we said, now we can open the Sidenav and it will not override the content of the page. But it's still like a little bit too close to the content, so I'm quickly gonna do like a content section padding. To do padding left and right only without adding any padding to the top, you can use the shorthand, a 0 at the beginning, which is the vertical side first, and then 1 rem. Okay, so this works. So another thing I want to do is have the content of the page, as I said, expand and shrink according to whether the Sidenav is open or closed. At the moment, we can see that the content or the content section always has the margin left of 250 pixels. I want this margin to only be applied when the Sidenav is open. Otherwise, I want the margin left to go back to 0. So I'll put it by default to 0. This will make it so that the page expands. And now I'll add to the function that I already made at the beginning another set property. This time I'm gonna set the property of the content section to have a left margin of 250 pixels only when I open the Sidenav. So let's start doing this. I'll declare a constant that contains a reference to the content section. So I'll call it content section. And then I'll do a document.query selector. I'll just copy and paste from above here. And do document.query selector dot content section. Okay, so this constant that I declared contains a reference to the content section of my page. And when I close the Sidenav, I want the content section. I want to target the content section. I want to go to the style of the content section, set the property of a certain style to have a left margin or a margin left of 0 pixels when I close the Sidenav. And I want to do the same thing when I open the Sidenav, but this time change it from 0 to 250 pixels. Like I'll do the opposite. I'll take the content section, go to the style, set the property of margin left to 250 pixels when I open the Sidenav. So let's see what happens now. Okay, as you can see, like the content section will get a margin when we open the Sidenav, and the margin will go back to being 0 when we close the Sidenav. Another thing I wanted to do is make it so that this transition happens gradually. To make it so, I will add like a property called transition and specify over how much time do I want the transition to take place. So I'll go to, first of all, I have to go to the Sidenav, to where I defined all the styles of the Sidenav, and target it with the property transition all, which means all transitions that happen to the Sidenav will take 1 second of time to be executed. This means that the Sidenav, when it opens, it will open over 1 second. And when it closes, it will close over 1 second. We want to do the same thing to the margin of the content page, because as you can see now that the content page like opens up immediately. We don't want that to happen. We want the content section, the content section to also open up gradually. So I'll add the same line that I added here, which is transition all of 1 second to the content section, which means any transition that happens to the content section, I also want that transition to happen over 1 second. So now let's see the result of that. Okay, so now you can see like the content will open and close over the span of 1 second. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is add like a gray overlay or a transparent overlay over my content section when the side nav is open. This is kind of like what happens when you open the YouTube side nav. It will display like a gray overlay over the content section. We will do that by placing a new div in the content section and have that div basically cover the content section with a black but transparent overlay. Let's see how that is done. So I'll go to the content section and add like a div with a class of black overlay. Okay, now I'll style the black overlay. I want the black overlay to cover the whole of the content section. And in order to do that, I'll give it a position of absolute and make it so that it sticks to every edge of the content section. I first need to give the content section a position of relative. So now when I create my overlay right here, black overlay, here is the black overlay style. I'll do like a position of absolute and give it a top of 0, which means go stick against the top, and then a left of 0, which means I also want it to stick to the left, and same thing to the right, and then the bottom again. So this effectively will make it so that the black overlay covers the closest item to it that has a position that is not its default value. In this case, the content section, it will go and stick to the top, left, right, and bottom side of it. So I'll just give it a black to show you at the beginning like the effect of it. Now it just like hides the whole thing. Maybe black is not the best color because it blends with the nav bar. I'll give it like a red. So now this is the black overlay that I just made. So what we want is a grayish transparent color. So I'll go for black, but give it like an alpha value of like 0.5. So at the moment I have my black overlay over the content, and as you can see it covers the whole content with like this color, which is a black transparent color. If I put the transparency to 1, which means no transparency, you obviously can't see anything. But since I put the transparency to 0.5, it means that the overlay is close to being black, but it's still like a little bit transparent enough for me to see what's behind the overlay. So now I want the black overlay to also be controlled with opening and closing the side nav. So basically when I open the side nav, I want the overlay to appear, and when I close the side nav, I want it to disappear. So since it's by default the side nav is closed, I also want to give the black overlay a display of none by default. So by default, I don't want the black overlay to be showing. I want the black overlay to only show when I open the side nav over here. So we have to add to our function a line of code that will make it so that the black nav gets opened, or sorry, gets displayed when I open the side nav. So let's go over here and first of all get a reference to the black overlay, kind of like we did with the side nav and the content section. So I'll just copy content section here and change it to black overlay. And document query selector dot, instead of having content section, I'll do like a black overlay. So now I have a reference to the black overlay in this constant. And then I can use it inside my close side nav and open side nav functions in the same way I did with content section and side nav. So I'll go for black overlay dot style, black overlay dot style set property, display to none when I close the Sidenav, and then take the same line of code and just copy and paste it here and open Sidenav, this time with a display of block, which is how you display it. So now that I open the Sidenav, it will display also the black overlay over the content section, and when I close the Sidenav, it will hide the black overlay. Something that I almost forgot, when I scroll down, you will see that this section of the website remains white. The way I want it to look is for this navigation bar on the left to fill the left side of the website that's at the moment is just white. So last thing I need to do now is go to the Nav Bar Styles and change the position from absolute to fixed. This will make it so that the way the Sidenav appears on the screen just remains fixed no matter how much you scroll the page. So this is how it looks. As you can see now, we can go up and down and the content section of the page will change, but the Sidenav remains fixed. And this is it, basically. This is what we wanted to do. We can open the Sidenav, have it push the content, display the black overlay over the content, close the Sidenav, the content goes back to its original size, it hides the overlay, and we're back to before opening the menu. So that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the tutorial, maybe learned something from it, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye everyone.